Hey, it's Hub. This is Video of the Damned, a horror review show on the Morbidly Beautiful Network. We're going to start off with two selections from the Salem Horror Fest that I had the opportunity to screen. Let's start with Purgatory Jack. I never thought I would say the following, but here we go. Somebody has come up with a movie that is a mix of Defending Your Life, Angel Heart, Repo Man, and Repo the Genetic Opera. This is by the Butler Brothers out of Canada. It's described as a neo-noir thriller. It takes place in a limbo where the victims of suicide either are trapped forever or they are doing good works to get moved on to heaven, or it's decided that they're getting dragged to hell. But their bodies are still vulnerable here, and there are a gang of marauders who are taking blood and body parts for their own use. Punk singer and poet Vivacious, played by Alexander Beaton, who, among other things, has been in Bring It On, Cheer or Die, has to navigate this world after an overdose with the help of Jack Marlin, a former musician turned 20 Styles detective played by Tim Rozon, who you may have seen in Lake Placid Legacy or Winona Earp. This is definitely one of the strangest films I've seen in a while, and I really love that about it. It's got a little something for everyone. It has mystery, it has body horror, it has commentary on suicide and self-harm, on body image, on how men prey on women, and even on how counterculture butts heads with fundamentalism. The acting is great. The special effects can be weird. There's some green screen decisions here that are odd, but definitely supposed to be surreal and stylistic. I'm specifically talking about the driving scenes that defy physics, but I really think it's worthwhile. And by all rights, this is going to become a cult hit. I also watched a documentary that is showing at Salem Horror Fest, Liminal. I am picky as hell about reality television and documentaries because I worked in that space for almost 10 years. In fact, I worked on many of the Ghost Hunters series. And this is kind of like that, but it's an LGBTQ plus lens looking at the paranormal investigation world. And, you know, there's a lot of documentaries that don't live up to their thesis. This one does a really good job of it. Liminal talks about why they think that folks from the queer community are attracted to the supernatural and maybe vice versa. This particular installment, and I should say it definitely feels like a reality show more than a documentary. It feels like they are intending to do more of these. But this particular installment looks at this issue specifically in the South, where attitudes about gay folks have definitely been problematic for many years. I am glad that there is this medium, that there is this format being explored by these queer filmmakers. I think it's great for representation, and I think that because of the vast underrepresentation of certain groups, that it's good for folks from those groups to come together and make work within a genre or format. Now, if you aren't a fan of paranormal investigations, then this might not be for you, but perhaps you're a person, a queer person or an ally who's interested to see how these particular folks are doing that. Maybe you've never seen those meters and people putting on the blindfold and trying to hear voices from the other side. I think some of those scenes went on a bit long. That's where I would imagine, as a former reality show grunt worker, that's where an editor would come in and maybe chop that up a little bit. But I think that there are some worthwhile interviews here and investigation footage. It's not complete. Like I said, this seems like the start of a journey, and that the filmmakers are intending to do more episodes of this. But I think this is a really interesting first start, and I'd be curious to see how they move from here. So this next movie has already come and gone from theaters. It's been out on screening a little bit, but I just wanted to say a few quick words about Lisa Frankenstein. So I loved this. I think a lot of people loved it. Maybe there's folks who didn't, but Kathryn Newton is really popular from this and Freaky and Abigail. I've never seen anything written by Diablo Cody that I did not enjoy. I'm not as familiar with Cole Sprouse's work, I'll be honest, but I think he does great here as the mostly silent monster. This very much felt like Heathers, but of course with that, Frankenstein motif. It felt like an 80s movie, not just because of the music, but everything about it felt like a funny, dark 80s comedy, maybe 90s. But, let's face it, it's got that Heather's vibe. Everybody's great in it. It's got just enough goriness to be interesting for horror fans. It's just funny enough to be for those folks who like comedy, but there's also definitely poignant moments. There's definitely an emotional through line to this whole story. Diablo Cody's really good at that, mixing comedy and drama. And we know from Jennifer's Body, she ain't bad at horror either. I love this film. I think that the ending left enough questions that you could stay in this world and see more adventures if they wanted to go that way. But if they don't, we have a lovely cult cinema favorite here for the ages. On a previous episode, I talked about When the Trash Man Knocks. I want to talk about two other movies by the same filmmaker that I recently enjoyed, Children of Sin and Triggered. I really enjoy the work of Christopher Wesley Moore and the troupe of actors that he tends to work with, including Joanne Robinson, who was in When the Trash Man Knocks that I spoke about previously, and this film, which is about a religious retreat house that some parents ship their at-risk youth to, and it turns out that the tough love here is way tougher than anybody could realize, and definitely not love. But this is a very horrific premise that speaks to the dangers of religious fundamentalism. I really enjoyed it. It's not just a creepy premise with some gory kills. There is some good weaving of a message here and some good drama as everybody deals with their feelings about religion and about being converted or the attempts to convert them. We've got some pretty politically incorrect comedy here about politically correct people in Triggered. This has a great cast, not only the CWM regulars like Meredith Moeller, who I've really come to like, and she's in A&P Films' upcoming OnlyFans, but you've got Amanda Weiss here from A Nightmare on Elm Street, and a bunch of other films, but you love her as Tina in Elm Street. But I was surprised by this one because Moore tends to look very sympathetically towards oppressed people, and I think it would be fair to guess that his views skew more towards the left, whereas Triggered really does lampoon the left, specifically that mid-2010s Tumblr type. I guess now you might see these folks more on Twitter, but people who really seem to be quote-unquote triggered at a lot of things, so-called JW, social justice warriors, and one of them decides that she's not getting enough attention for her views, and she fakes being the victim of a local serial killer, rather an escaped would-have-been victim. And this causes some problems not only with the killer, who knows that they didn't go after her, but with some other folks who are suspicious of her motives and her authenticity or lack thereof. I'm going to tell you, Ryan Murphy could have taken this and run with it and probably made something really annoying. Sorry, I'm not a big fan of Murphy, but I really do appreciate Christopher Wesley Moore's take on it. It helps that it's really funny and that there are some decent kills in it as well. And of course, I love the actors in it. Love Meredith Moeller, like I said. I really appreciate Moore as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, and that he's told different stories in different ways. So check out what you can from his filmography, and let's keep an eye on what he does next. Here's another doubleheader from one filmmaker. We're going to talk about Teddy Told Me To and Las Vegas Frankenstein. Both of these films were directed by Tom Devlin, who has an accomplished career in makeup and special effects. He also runs the Monster Museum in Boulder City, Nevada. And both films were written by Lola Devlin, who is Tom Devlin's wife and editor of Las Vegas Frankenstein, and Vincent Cusimano, who stars in Las Vegas Frankenstein as Victor Van Pelt, a Las Vegas hypnotist or illusionist, magician, what have you, who decides to spice up his act by bringing back the dead. His wife and assistant is played by Victoria Strange, and she's great in this. There's actually a lot of great cameos in this from Noah Hathaway of Neverending Story, Eileen Dietz from The Exorcist, and a prominent role starring Daniel Roebuck, who you would know from a lot of the Rob Zombie films. There's a lot of great Vegas atmosphere in this. I thought the cast was great. Cusimano does not leave anything on the table as far as being a sleazeball, and it's a fearless performance. There's a great ending, which I should have seen coming, but I didn't, and maybe you will, but I still enjoy the payoff. However, for me, the whole was not greater than the sum of its body parts. There was just something missing. Maybe they took too long to get to the monster. Maybe the sense of humor really wasn't for me, but plot-wise, it just seemed like there was a lot of spinning plates until we got to the real fun stuff, and while watching plates spin might be a fun act to see in Vegas, for me, there was just some potential here that wasn't quite met. Now, your mileage may vary, and I definitely recommend checking it out for yourself because, again, there's some great work done in this film. The same team was behind Teddy Told Me To, and I really enjoyed this one. The sense of humor struck me just right this time around. This has Felissa Rose, CJ Graham, Lisa Wilcox, and a few other horror notables and cameos. But the plot is reminiscent of a Midwestern shot-on-video classic called Hauntedween. Now, that is about college kids who decide to raise funds by resurrecting an old haunt where there had been the site of a murder. And this is about a couple who decide to buy an old haunt that was closed down because of a murder, and they are going to kind of play off the history of what happened at that site. And that definitely offends some folks that they consider exploitive, and things come to a head when more murders start happening. Now, there's some really fun moments here. There's let's put on a show kind of mentality that happens as these people put together and resurrect this haunt, and that's what I liked about Hauntedween as well, but this really takes that even further. And so you have that juxtaposition of comedy and fun with then the real-life horror, real life in this story universe that is settling in and coming to a head with these folks. And very satisfying ending, kind of funny, kind of creepy. I don't want to spoil it, but I would say Tom Devlin really shows some advancement here from Las Vegas Frankenstein to Teddy Told Me To, which I find to be the superior of the two movies, and I understand he has a couple other slated for release that I am looking forward to seeing. Finally, I have to talk about last year's Dark Harvest. Dark Harvest is an adaptation of the 2006 novel of the same name by Norman Partridge. The film is directed by David Slade, who also directed Hard Candy and 30 Days of Night. Two of its notable actors are Jeremy Davies from Lost, Helter Skelter, Justified, Black Phone, and Emery Crutchfield from the TV series Fargo and True Detective. This movie's like Pumpkinhead meets The Outsiders. It's small town, Midwest America, 1962, and the teenage boys of the town have to go out and hunt Sawtooth Jack every Halloween. He's a scarecrow ghoul that comes out in the cornfield and starts killing people trying to get to the church by midnight, and they all have to try to get him. Some boys will die, but the boy who kills Sawtooth Jack will get a grand prize, and so will the family. This happens every year. It's a necessary sacrifice for the harvest, right? As always, there's more than meets the eye, but let's talk about the Misfits mask, the Crimson Ghost mask there. There's Violent World references and just Misfits references. It's quite odd, but I love it. It's quite scary and quite sad with boys being killed and the racial politics of the 60s, promises of a bright and wealthy future to get you out of the town that might not hold up. Come on to a Dark Harvest with me and check this out. Okay, that's all I've got for now. I will see you on the other side. I remain Hub. And special thanks as always to Stephanie, the mother of Morbidly Beautiful. You can catch her and all of our writers and podcasters on the Morbidly Beautiful Network and at morbidlybeautiful.com. You can reach me on social media at Brody Hubbard.